it's time now to review headlines on today's newspapers. And joining us, of course, he's right here with us, the ombudsman of this day and Arise Media Group, Kayode Komolafe, as we call him, Mr. KK. Good morning.
Pleased to be
again.
here.
All right.
All right, KK, let's jump straight into it. We'll start with this day on Sunday, the newspaper of record. Let's start with the lead story this time around, given the importance of what is happening globally. And the headline says, U.S. tariffs to maintain liquidity. CBN injects dollars into FX market. And the writer says oil price slump by 12% threatens dollar inflows, external reserves. A lot of people have been, commenting, debating on the propriety or otherwise of the retaliatory tariffs by President Trump. He called it, what did he call it? Something day? We mentioned
Liberation Day.
Liberation Day, he called it. But then, let's see how that pans out. I'm sure that KK will have one or two words on that. On top of the lead story, tension grips Kano over Emir Sanusi's invitation by the Inspector General. Monarch summoned to appear on Tuesday over incident during Salah celebrations. That's an interesting one, given the fact that they even had to cancel the Durbar celebrations, But now with Salah, what they were trying to avoid with Durbar eventually happened during the summer, sadly. And then the strip on top of the Kano story, Anambra governorship primaries. Abga returns Soludo unopposed. Moghalu wins Labour Party ticket. Interesting development for the election that is coming later this year. And then the window story, DMO, Nigeria's public debt stood at 144.665 trillion in December of 2024. Lagos, Rivers, Ogun are three most indebted states. Jigawa is least with less than 2 billion debt. Interesting. When you say Lagos, Rivers, Ogun, it would look like the states where visible development, infrastructural development, are happening. Of course, naturally, are the most indebted because they are borrowing to finance development. Jigawa, on the other hand, is the least. Maybe Jigawa is just basically comfortable with cutting his coat according to, to his cloth. And last but not the least is the strip story under the window story. Lokubiri condemns attack on gas pipeline in Bayelsa, vows to bring perpetrators to justice. Of course, we can't leave this day without the cover picture, which of course runs across all the 6 columns of the cover story. I can see the chairman. Do I see somebody that I know closely on this? Do I see Genix, chief of what's that thing that Rufai called it?
Umukwata Kingdom. My little hometown in Delta State. Yeah, it was quite a
Women
nice
at first
moment.
take center stage. That's how
with
it
all
was
the
described.
Arise News female journalists this day. Of course, we had our pioneering MD there, Ijeoma Nwogwu, and Ruth Osime, who has been with This Day Style for decades. And, she did amazingly well. Of course, Ngozi Alegbu there. We were just, hanging out, and it was just that perfect moment. Absolutely. And we took that picture. Fantastic. And, again, kudos to the Duke of Owa Kingdom, who you were hanging out with, Mr. Komolafe. You know that I will throw you on that. You guys had a nice celebration yesterday in Delta State. Kudos to the Duke of Owa Kingdom for pulling off that remarkable ceremony honoring women. 80 women were honored that day. I'd like to also thank him very much for the opportunity, for giving me this platform to be able to share my voice. Again, thank you, Prince Nduka Obaigbena. Mr. Komolafe.
Yes, of course. Congratulations will still be in order, to Ruth, Ijeoma, Ngozi, and of course, our own OG here, I particularly, maybe as the next to Tarrifs, let me, if you may, to justify why we have to use that photograph. I mean, that is, I'm commending the editor of This Day on Sunday using it. It's always said that we in the media, we pay attention, to every other person. That more often than not, maybe out of modesty that we don't continue. So I think once in a while, I mean, it's definitely not, it could be in order to actually, so I think the celebration, of our own women while celebrating, scores of women in Nigeria, was quite in order. So once more, congratulations. If let's take the economic stories first, on the front page of This Day on Sunday. That is namely the huge figure, from the Debt Management Office. Yes. First, that is the window story. Now, it's quite an important story, because it should also be a reminder to this topic, in the economic discussions in the country, about, the problem of indebtedness. And that this should be another occasion to remind those in charge of governance that instead of presenting the huge figure, trillions, of budget, as a, so that it not be, scaremongering, for the economy, that we should be, those in government should be able to, should not be tired in justifying, the debt. That is, if you borrowed, for a particular project, so people, psychologically, the people can be mobilized. People say, this is what the debt, this is what the money is committed to, Even when we may not be having the result right now, even if it is in the future, then of course, it will be easier, to mobilize the public, morally, and politically, to see it. But when you just give the figures, like that, and then people will be wondering, what have we spent, the money on, I'm saying that it should be maybe like a follow-up story to actually, find out what, especially for the government that is there now, because again, don't forget that, this is a cumulative figure, some of these were, came, into being, in the lives of in the previous administrations, but for the portion of it, that those who are in charge of governance, both at the federal and the state level, are responsible for, they should be able to justify, point out especially landmark, projects, for which, the debt is.
That's an important thing to say, given the fact that, these figures too, is that as at December of last year, between January and now, of course, we are aware of additional debts that, the federal government, is pursuing, particularly from the World Bank. So what that simply means is that the figure will rise, and the need for justification becomes even more necessary, on the part of the authorities.
I agree with you. Then, the other economic story, of course, is the lead story, of This Day on Sunday. That is the intervention, of
the first
CBN, in the forest market. Of course, the reason is quite clear. The twin reasons of both the slump in oil price, but perhaps more significantly, the resonance of what is happening in the United States. The tariff war, which has been launched, by President Trump, in America, and of course, don't forget that our own portion. Our own portion of it was the 14%. I think Nigeria is 14%.
Yes.
We are lucky. There are countries that will have higher percentages of tariffs. Now, again, so that is a confirmation of what people have been saying, that every other country, perhaps, at least, or maybe most countries, are trying to adjust the new reality being presented, by President Trump, to the world. But I think more fundamentally, and from the perspective of political economy, Perhaps Nigeria, like maybe other countries, I mean, this should, it trigger a fundamental rethink about economic management. Because what Trump has shown now is that, every country, has to bear responsibility, for its own economic management, And that because not just with what is happening with the tariff, it's just only one aspect of the reordering of the world order, by Trump, the post-1945 world orders, at the level of politics, at the level of, foreign relations. But now, regarding foreign trade, which is, a very significant aspect of, a very significant economic aspect of, the Trump revolution, in the United States, and that this, I said that, looking at it from political economic approach, that what is happening now is a confirmation, of the fact that no country, leaves its economic management to market forces, that the governments are elected, to manage economy. Market has a role to play. The forces, but the business of economic management is not that of market forces, it is that of government. And that is what Trump is telling the whole world, And again, it reminds me of what a former lecturer in economics in Cambridge, a South Korean economist, Jun Shang, in his famous books, says 23 things. The title of the book is 23 things they don't tell you about capitalism, that you are having the reverberation, worldwide, because this is happening in America, is because America is the headquarters of, of global of capitalism, and that before now, what Western, institutions, were lecturing the world that free trade, is borderless, and especially in the era of what they call globalization, which is actually a euphemism, for the spreading of global capitalism. Now, Trump now is more or less applying a brake, to globalization. He's actually upending it, by its action, and that what experts have been referring to as free trade is essentially an illusion. That is what I'm telling the world, that there's nothing like free trade. And anywhere, every country has to determine how it wants to trade with others, and what is its own criteria. You don't just leave it into some phantom, market forces that will control it. And that's why I say that, apart from this tweaking with forest policies and the rest, that economic managers here perhaps will have to sit and have a rethink, from a political economic perspective about how we are going to manage, our own economy, based on the principle of, self-reliance, national interest, and also to serve, the public good, in Nigeria.
All right. Yes, well said, Mr. Komolafe, because we don't have much time. Another story I'd like from this day headline is the Anambra story, where Moghalu clinched the LP ticket, and we also saw that Soludo was returned unopposed by APGA. If we have that in another paper, we would like to also cover that. But let's head over now to This Day Style. If you can pull up This Day Style now, the cover picture there, of course, is the Arise Gala, a celebration of women making impact. Pictured there is supermodel Naomi Campbell. And we also have the governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, and Kanayo Awani, who's the leader in Africa Trade and Development Finance. Kachi Ofia, I'd love for you to help me out unpack This Day Style today, because you were there and you were one of the producers there doing the Lord's work. Please.
Yes. Oh, I like how you put it. I really do. So the red carpet for This Day Style, rather the Arise Gala, I would say it was one of the most interesting that we've seen, because it was literally a walkthrough of power and elegance.
Yes.
We had everybody coming in, just stop by to see a few things. And I'm sure Rice 360 has aired that production, which I found really interesting. But I think it just suffices to say that Naomi Campbell's speech really touched a lot of hearts, because just like you rightly said, with the Duke giving a platform,
yes.
she mentioned how this is a man who's constantly believed in her vision for Africa and African fashion, and has given her literally the car to ride on,
yes.
to, you know, achieve her goals. So it was a really beautiful moment on stage there with Kanayo Awani as well. The work she's doing, I think it's more important that we continue to celebrate these women. And of course, These Days Style today is loaded with pictures and details that you may have missed from watching the live broadcast. So be sure to pick up a copy. You never know, you might even find yourself in it. You know?
If you attended. It's definitely a collector's item there. And you know, we had huge performances by Asha. I was dancing to Tenny.
I was dancing to Asha.
I was.
You were.
And I saw Mr. Komolafe, but we missed Siva Yorinde there. He missed. But he had this. You had that event that you just said. He was
I was meant to be at the party.
Yes.
You know that I don't meet
He
like
doesn't.
that.
I don't think anyone likes to miss an Arise party.
Yes. All right. I think we have discussed the Arise Fashion Week. The Arise Gala. Again, kudos to all the women making impact in Nigeria and beyond. Again.
And kudos to the editor of This Day on Style.
Yes.
For providing this collector's item.
Item. I mean, inside
readers
the
will find very
inside
pleasant. It'll be a delight.
Beautiful. Inside the edition there, we had like pictures of almost all the awardees there. It was beautiful, well put together. Kudos, Konya.
Amazing.
All right, let's move on to The Nation very quickly. The story that OG wanted Keke to talk about is there, but what I wanted to add to the tariff story was how The Nation put it, a bit, slightly differently. How Nigeria can survive new U.S. import tariffs by experts. That's the lead headline in today's This Day. And one of the key things that they say is that stakeholders demand bloc African response, given what you were saying about, how should we approach this? Can we have a bloc African response? It doesn't look like that to me, given that Zimbabwe, for example, has already said, we may not agree with what Trump has done, but we don't want to fight America. We don't want to create any trade wars. And we will discuss and liaise with the American authorities to see how both parties can win. That's Zimbabwe talking. We don't know yet what the Nigerian government will say, or the Ghana, or ECOWAS, different blocks within the region. And of course, it also talks about the CBN intervention with the $197.71 million. A few other stories. The Anambra 2025, Soludo, Mohalu, Imaj Abga, LP Guba candidates, which will be very interesting, given that PDP doesn't have a candidate because nobody bought the form.
This is so interesting.
Is it not interesting?
Really?
We'll wait for who the candidate of the APC will be, and we'll see.
I believe that the APC man who's United, he stepped down yesterday. I saw that. What the CEO of United Airlines, what was his name again?
Yeah, he was here for an interview.
Yes, the CEO of United Airlines, Obiora. Yes, he stepped down only yesterday. He was the APC aspirant.
Yeah, one of the leading aspirants.
All right, so another story that is important, and I think that Keke will like it, my plan to rebuild Oyo by Niwalafi Owade, who was, his coronation was yesterday after I returned from Canada. It looks like Canada is giving us a lot of, traditional rulers these days. Are you not aware?
I was hoping that you can help me out with that.
And then one more story I think that might be of interest, the Plateau killings. That's on a sad note. Tinubu orders manhunt for perpetrators, So there are a number of stories. They are laughing over your story. And those will be interesting. The only other one would be we've already touched them. Okay, we've touched the police Sanusi story. Natasha, why recall petition failed, but they're attributing this to sources. That's another story on the cover of The Nation.
Yeah, maybe it will be in order to start with congratulations to the new Alafi, who did the first, and of course the 46th, Alafi in history. While congratulating the new monarch, of course, one of the most senior, in Yoruba land, as a traditional ruler, is that a reminder that coming in, that he has a responsibility, to protect that is now a custodian, of a great, culture, and heritage, heritage, that the protecting and maintaining, the integrity of that heritage, and deepening, the culture, should be, his responsibility. Apart from the fact that, this position also puts him, in a position to, I mean, the stool of Alaafin, that the throne that he has assumed now, also puts him in a very, a good position, to ensure the development of the community by, cooperating with the local government and the state government, so that the people of Oyo, and of course in his environment, will have cause to, celebrate, that his reign has been that of peace, and development. So we wish the Alaafin well. Now the Anambra story, yes, with Moalo, emerging as the Labour candidate, and of course another technocrat, and Governor Soludo, going into the race unopposed, as the candidate of APGA, that is the November election, promises to be a keenly, contested one, while wishing all the candidates, well, the reminder would be that, giving the atmosphere, of the, social, and political atmosphere of Anambra State, that it would be important, to conduct the campaigns, peacefully, and to ensure that all parties, comply, with the law. Then I also find it noteworthy, like Oji has said, that PDP does not have a candidate. And this is a huge irony, because hitherto, if you remember, in 1979, at the takeoff of the dispensation, PDP won. Yeah, yes, PDP won the governorship election in Anambra State, with the emergence of Dr. Mbadiniju, as a governor. And yes. Since then, you could see that in Anambra State, you have, very, strong PDP presence. So it's a huge irony that...
Ndidi was the last PDP governor, I believe.
Okay, that was before the abduction. Yes, it was. Yes, it was elected, as a PDP governor. So I think that is something, so much of an irony. Then, of course, the Plateau killings. Then we, our hearts, go to, the families of the victims, and also, sympathy to those people who were injured. And just like the president has ordered, I think it will be important, to get the perpetrators, of the crime,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
more fundamentally, to look at why do we have these eruptions, these episodes, violent, episodes, in Plateau, and tackle it, Yeah.
All right, well, I believe we can go straight to the Punch newspapers. Beginning with the major story, ambassadors, we've spoken about this on the morning show with regards to the fact that this is definitely a serious problem. The fact that we do not have adequate ambassadors to represent us outside the country. But now we know the FG, that's the federal government, is screening a few people, Femi Fani-Kayode, Femi Pedro, and all those nominees undergoing DSS screening as the federal government is set to make new appointments. It's about time. It's been a couple of months, actually. We talked about this yesterday. Let's go over to the masthead. Stolen jewelry. This was a story that was out in the papers yesterday. NBA engaging Patience Jonathan over ex-worker's 6 years detention. Apparently, the story is the trial has been adjourned 40 different times with regards to these staff who have been in detention. And the question is, why are they adjourning this case, and why have they been in prison without trial over the past 6 years? We've talked about a couple of other stories. Obawa, they crowned 46 Alafin as Tinubu seeks support for monarch. And then as we begin to wrap things up, I think this is a very interesting story. On a sad note, the FRSC officer and 24 others killed in Ogun Road crashes. Yeah. If you could just begin to speak on that. Of course, we've spoken on a couple of other headlines that made the front page of the Punch newspapers today.
Really quickly, 30 seconds if you
sad
can.
news there,
Yes.
about the Ogun crash. Then, but on the patient, I think it will be, I'm afraid, Kashi, that it will be contradiction in terms. If a case is already in court and it's been adjourned 40 times, so we cannot say that it's without trial. I think once the case is in court.
Well, how was it adjourned?
But the thing is, it is with, that's the point is, while that I understand where you're coming from, it has been moved forward. The courts can decide to stay and say, okay, we're moving this case to this amount of time. The point is, for every time the court has sat, it has not been addressed. Whether or not it's in trial or it's on the side, it's just not been addressed. 40 different times. They've been in prison 6 years, and that is illegal. That is unconstitutional.
Well, there's so many sides to the story. There was a story about whether it was theft, but now we're seeing that it was some sort of murder
stolen
case.
Jewelry.
No,
there's
a new story out that it was that they were contracted to assassinate her. So that's the latest update on the Payson Jonathan story. So there are the different stories that have been.
But the calculation is just that the case is in court. The case is in court, so we cannot say they are being detained without charging them to court. The case is in court.
Well, all right.
So we can call for the expedition,
which is what we should do.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Komolafe, I'd like to thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed newspaper review today with you. I hope to see you next week on our Sunday Tonic program.
Thank you so much.